when you say like just constantly putting yourself out there and feeling that shift, and it helps you learn like where your brand needs to shift, I think that's exactly what helps people keep moving forward.
Hey, my Feel Good friend, and welcome back to the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and my friend, we are totally going to geek out in today's conversation, or at least I did. Okay. We are chatting with Gabrielle Blades, who is a graphic designer, and you know that branding and design is one of my favorite topics. And I probably told Gabby that like 5 times during our conversation. We talk all about branding in general, but also Gabby and her personal experience with branding herself as a designer, and also when and how she decided to rebrand her own business, which was super, super interesting. So I know you're going to love this conversation. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Hey, friend, and welcome to the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I'm here to help you market your business in a genuine way that works without wasting your precious time. On this show, we chat about social media strategy and mindset tips with a focus on, you guessed it, feeling good. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some genuine conversation for the good of your biz. Do you know what your brand vibe is on Instagram? I have a new fun quiz that's just for you, my friend. I, of all people, know how hard it is to figure out how the heck you're supposed to translate your brand to the gram. And with this quick 7-question quiz, we will help you hone in on your brand's personality, voice, and visuals so that you can show up consistently and create content that looks beautiful and feels on brand for you. This quiz is so awesome. It's been a long time coming, and I know that you're going to have a lot of fun with it. Plus, the results will help you show up in the best way for you. If you'd like to check out our new brand vibe quiz, just head to feelgoodsocial.com/quiz. Pretty easy. Head to feelgoodsocial.com/quiz to find out what your brand's vibe is on social media and start showing up there for your brand. Hi, Gabrielle. Thank you so much for joining us, lady. I'm so excited to have you on the Feel Good Social podcast.
Thanks, Kinsey. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. Okay. So I already introduced you just a little bit in the intro, but I'd love to hear from you. Who are you? What do you do? And who do you serve?
Okay, so I'm Gabrielle Blades. I also go by Gabby. It's often a question. Not just
one from
you.
me.
It's not just from you, I promise. I own Blades Creative Design Studio, and I specialize in branding and packaging design. And I love to serve creative wellness and lifestyle businesses.
Yeah. And I love your branding so much. And I can't wait to geek out with you about that. But I would always like to kind of ask people, like, how did you get started in entrepreneurship? Let's maybe start there.
Okay. Well, I feel like entrepreneurship is often something that people think is like this beautiful, glamorous thing that people plan to do. And for me, I definitely never planned to be an entrepreneur. I just honestly needed a job. And in Chattanooga, where I graduated from my university, there's not a ton of design opportunities. There's a few agencies there and there's a few in-house jobs there. But when I graduated, I ended up taking the first job I could get, which was a part-time position with the city of Chattanooga doing design research for a multimodal transportation system study, which all of that is a mouthful. And it was really weird for me, and it was random. I thought I would be an in-house designer somewhere or at an agency, but I was like, I'm a very practical person. So I was like, yes, a job. Totally thought I would have moved after college, but like, again, I'm very practical. So I was like, okay, I have a job offer. I should take it. And it was actually a part-time position, kind of. So like 30 hours a week, and it was short term. So it was supposed to be a 2-year contract. And for a while there, I just like laid low and like did my 30 hours. And then all of a sudden I was like, what am I doing? I used to do so much and now it's time to multitask again. So I started taking on other projects. And so I ended up taking another contract on with a nonprofit called Launch in Chattanooga. And it was called Launch Cha, I guess, for a while there. I don't know if they still go by that name, but It was very entrepreneur forward for the underserved in the Chattanooga community. And so I learned a lot about entrepreneurship there and kind of realized like, oh, my parents were entrepreneurs growing up and like, I could do this. Like I could keep taking on projects and, build a business. And so as that year passed, my job with the city became less relevant. And like, I was kind of just creating projects to fill my time. And at the end of that, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to either find a job or I'm going to keep taking on work. And so I ended up getting my business license in order to prep myself for whatever legal things I needed to prepare for as I think a 24-year-old or 23-year-old at the time. And so I got my business license on my 24th birthday and signed up for my EIN. And even from there, I like didn't brand myself. It took me 6 months to create a logo for myself. And then it took me like maybe 4 or 5 more months to even like advertise myself that much. I even like applied for a job after I started like doing trade shows, which is such a weird, like as a graphic designer, I learned very quickly that like that was not how I would get business. But that's my story. It was kind of an accident. And I'm somebody who's always thinking a few steps ahead. So I was just preparing for the potential of the future and not really knowing what that meant. And so I had no idea what I was getting into. And now it's been 6.5 years.
Heck yeah, lady. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. And I was laughing at the part where you're like, yeah, I didn't plan to be an entrepreneur, but then like I kind of did it and I realized like my parents were, because that's kind of how it happened with me too. And I never really did the whole like 9-to-5 job thing. I did the whole quit college, move to Colorado, in the service industry, become a server sort of thing. But yeah, like I've always had that entrepreneur spirit, but it didn't necessarily like settle home for me that this was like a dream or something that I wanted to do. And then like all of a sudden it happened and I was like, oh yeah, like my parents were entrepreneurs like my whole life. Like I've always kind of had that like idea of freedom that I think that sometimes when your parents are entrepreneurs, they like give you that permission slip that you don't even realize they're giving you, that like you can do what you want, you can be what you want, all that stuff. Whereas, in working with a bunch of different entrepreneurs, I've realized that sometimes people who've had parents who have just had like the lifelong careers and stuff like don't necessarily have that permission. Do you feel like that?
I totally feel like that. So a realization I had with that entire thing of my parents basically being entrepreneurs is they never called it that. I don't even know if entrepreneurship was a thing up until like our time. And they called themselves self-employed. And they just did, like my mom owned a hair salon and then my dad, he was in the petroleum industry, but he was a contractor with the petroleum industry. He wasn't like working as an employee for anybody. And then they built, like my parents together built houses together and then apartments and sold them. So like a bunch of things.
Yeah.
And like I always saw my mom at home working and like whether it was in the salon or doing paperwork, like I always had that example, but I honestly didn't think anything of it. And it didn't hit me that they were self-employed or entrepreneurs until I did my rebrand probably.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I was like 29.
I know. Isn't that hilarious? Like I went through that same thing where I was like, yeah, I didn't even think I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I like got the entrepreneur certificate program thing in college or whatever.
Oh, no way. I love that too.
But I mean, I didn't graduate, so I don't even know if that like still counts or whatever.
But like, that actually, I feel like counts more.
Right? Like, yeah. I know. Whatever.
You're living the life.
Living the life.
Yes.
But yeah, it's so funny because like I remember being in college and I think my counselor must have been like, oh yeah, you should do this like as a credit and stuff. And I was like, entrepreneurship, like knowing the word, but not really understanding like the full scope. And then, yeah, being 29 or 30, whenever I realized like, oh yeah, my parents have been like lifelong. It's so funny that disconnect and how things are changing, but I think it's awesome, like the way business is moving and stuff. But I'm so glad that you have like gone down this journey and whatnot. And you mentioned the rebrand. I'm so interested to ask you about, as like a designer yourself, as a graphic designer, like you kind of creating this business for yourself, but like
not necessarily taking the time or it taking you a while to like create your own logo and start promoting yourself. A lot of our listeners are like right in those beginning phases too, like just starting out. And it's so hard to like, I don't know, there's so many things, like letting go of perfectionism, finding the time to spend on your own business and on yourself, like finding the confidence and overcoming the fear to put yourself out there. Like, what did that like whole thing look like for you? What do you think were some of those struggles, right, when you're just starting out?
Oh, that's such a loaded question.
It is. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think it is so important, and it's what my clients are going through all the time. And oftentimes people who come to me who are not ready, like to brand at all yet because they don't know anything about their business. So I think that's the struggle, is that when we do want to start a business, you're like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do I create my services first and figure out my audience? Or do I create this brand to advertise myself first and then figure out where my audience is from there? And I think it can be either. I do think you have to have some sort of branding in order to advertise yourself on Instagram, or when you're going out to meetings, now that we can kind of meet people now, or on your website, which is super important. And even if that's like a really nicely typed out business name, that's great for the first 6 months to a year. You can make it on that, and maybe a little longer. But when it comes to my branding, because I'm very much a conceptual designer, like I couldn't just be like Blades Creative and like have it in just text. Like it had to have meaning behind it. And that was really important to me. And so the first round of my branding, before I knew like who I was going to serve, what actually I was going to be providing for people, I knew that I was like really passionate about process. And I was also passionate about like passing on my family name. So my dad has 2 daughters. And if we were to get married and take our husband's names, we wouldn't be able to pass the name on. Anyway, my life is very different now. And I'm like, I don't know if I really like that matters. I don't know. But I do like, I really cherish like my family and my father and like what he's done for our family. So my first round of branding was based on like the Cherokee Indian process of like working with the resources around you, because my dad is a 4th Cherokee, and then that makes me an 8th, I believe. So that was super important to me to like honor my dad and like the skills that I've been passed on, and like how do I use that in design and my design process, because I truly feel like my design process is like very like taking the resources around me, doing the research, using pen and paper. I don't just hop on the computer. So I really took that into consideration when putting my branding together. And so I created a logo that incorporated the arrowhead. And I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I feel like this is appropriate to bring up. But I was like, was that cultural appropriation? And I had to actually look up what that meant, because it is something that we all need to be considering right now. And it turns out that because I was honoring like my ancestors and I like did the research, it is appropriate. It is not appropriation. So fun fact.
Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that. Because like it is something, it's like a concern that I think a lot of people have and they just don't realize thinking about that stuff. So thanks for sharing that, lady.
Yeah, I know that's like a total side note, but when I'm creating a brand, I really have to take into consider everything. And I want to be considerate of every person and every culture. So back then, we might not have been thinking about that as much. But today, I want to have learned something. So I feel like I'm definitely going down a rabbit hole. But that's where my first brand came from. And I rebranded last April. So I guess I was almost 6 years in, and my life had changed a lot. So when I first opened Blades Creative, it was just Blades Creative. I honestly had no idea what I was doing. I offered any kind of design service I could have. And I worked with anybody who would say yes to me. And that ended up being a lot of nonprofits. I loved working with them, and they loved working with me. A ton of small businesses, a few larger businesses that I would contract with regularly. But by the time I was ready to rebrand, I had grown a lot as a human, And I had taken on a lot of work that taught me lessons of like, what do I not want to work on? What do I do want to work on? And I had an assistant for a while who helped me out. We went through this phase of Blades Creative where I was winning a lot of awards and like I was very buttoned up and very professional. And it was just, my life was changing so much. And I was finding a lot of boundaries in my life in the sense of like, how do I not work on Blades Creative all the time? How do I take care of myself? I was really, I don't know, my whole life felt like Blades Creative or design or both. And so I really needed to focus on like finding time for hobbies. But I started doing, I had been doing yoga for a long time anyway, but then I started doing Ashtanga yoga, which is like a complete lifestyle change. Mm-hmm. So then my work schedule was kind of based on my practice. I started learning about Ayurveda. And I'm not saying I'm like this perfectly balanced person, but these habits and these things I started to learn about outside of my life or outside of my work life became really important in my work life and like how I interacted with my clients. And it was improving my attitude and it was changing the kind of client I wanted to work with in branding and like anything really. I think the things you really enjoy outside of work kind of start to get incorporated in your work life. Like maybe if you're not, maybe not corporate, but like, let's say you really love working out, you might want to be a personal trainer. So that's when the rebrand started to come to my mind because I was like, it felt really weird to me to be really buttoned up online, but feeling like my business was shifting and how I interacted with my clients was shifting. Also, the pandemic happened, and that was even more of like a push for me to kind of change the way things looked. People were tired of seeing that professional, clean look. And we were all talking on Zoom as if we were in each other's homes, like seeing each other's pets and like we're basically in pajamas. And it just, things were changing and I was changing. And because the rebrand had already come up to me in January 2020, the pandemic kind of pushed it further in the sense of this needs to happen. Like, I don't feel like I'm in alignment with my business. And I think that's a huge reason to rebrand is when you're not feeling in alignment with your business.
Oh my gosh. And like, I'm on the edge of my seat, like squirming over here because I love talking about branding, let's be honest. But you know what I love? I think that a lot of people struggle with branding. I did. And I actually went through a rebrand like 1 year into my business. And like everything that you're saying hits home for me. Like I was feeling like the brand I was creating was not in alignment with who I was and what I wanted to show up. I was trying to create a brand of what I thought people wanted instead of who I am. And then like I rebranded and everything is just like clicking together. But I just opened my online membership. I'm so excited. I love all my people in there. And a lot of people in there are like struggling with the branding process. I do work with a lot of people who are in those beginning stages of their business, wearing all the hats, trying to figure out how can I show up on social media. And we have like two camps of people usually. It's like the people who don't know who the heck their brand is and it stops them from showing up on social media, or like they feel like branding is just like so important and they have to figure out their brand first and they're not like able to take action until they can figure out their brand. And then you have the people who just like are showing up, but like it feels all over the place a little bit. And it's like not super strategic because they haven't taken time to think about their brand. And I feel like, both ends of the spectrum are kind of hard to be on because it's like you need to find that messy middle ground of like thinking about your brand and showing up strategically, but also realizing that like your brand could evolve. And sometimes like it doesn't have to be perfect. Like it has to be somewhat thoughtful, but also like not perfect necessarily, especially when you're just starting out. Cause I think that part of the process of me just like showing up and trying to be this brand that then I realized I wasn't, that helped me. Like the action I was taking through that helped me figure out what my brand really is, So like, did you feel that in the beginning? Was it like scary to take like action did you start feeling like unaligned with your brand and like it stopped you from showing up at all or anything like that? I know it's like 3 questions at once.
No, you ask questions the same way I do. I'm like, here are 5 questions. Can you answer all of them? I can relate to that completely. So when it comes to like being in that messy middle ground, I can 100% relate. When you say like just constantly putting yourself out there and feeling that shift and it helps you learn like where your brand needs to shift, I think that's exactly what helps people keep moving forward. So when it came to shifting from the old branding for Blades Creative to the new branding, it took me about a year to even begin designing it because I felt so like when you have a brand for so long, I had the other one for 5-ish years, you feel really stuck in the sense of, oh my God, is my audience going to be okay with this? Are they going to accept me? Because I felt the same you did, that I made this brand. Yes, this brand was created to represent my process, but by year 5, I felt like it was something that people enjoyed and like didn't even know the story behind, but didn't resonate with me. And so I had an assistant for a long time, and I mentioned her earlier and I adore her. I think she's lovely, but there was a moment where she was very involved in the social media and we worked together for about 2 years. And I really wanted to start putting like more cell phone pictures on Instagram and like feel like showing my life would be really important. And like Blades Creative is me. I'm the person people are working with. And we really struggled to see eye to eye on that. So that was a challenge. So I will say, like, if you're feeling out of alignment, but there are team members that can't see your vision, it can be a real challenge. I really loved working with her and she really helped me, but we separated ways and it allowed me to just be like, okay, this is my opportunity for a fresh start. I'm in charge. This is my business and I'm allowed to do what I need to do to keep moving forward. And I started to do more like lives. And this was like mid-pandemic, like right in the beginning, probably like May 2020. And I had been thinking about the rebrand for that much time, January to May. And so May 2020, I started to just like put myself out there on my Instagram. It was like my main way of connecting with people. And so I was doing a lot of lives. I was like unboxing things, like trying to connect with people about packaging and branding and talking to my entrepreneur friends and just like showing up as myself with no makeup, like we talked about earlier, like no makeup in my t-shirts and just being like, just talking about branding and talking about business. And like people were really responding and I felt like I was connecting with an audience more than ever. And it kind of validated me of like, oh, like people do love me. They do accept me. Like, I hate that, but it's true. I'm a 3. Like, I love validation. It's deep within me. But also it was deep connection. Like I was actually connecting with other entrepreneurs and other, people online about the things I was passionate about. And sometimes I would sneak in the wellness stuff or like the yoga stuff and see what was happening. So I think like sneaking things in here and there and testing things out is very okay. Like, first off, Instagram could disappear tomorrow. Facebook is very different now. I'm not on Facebook a lot, but like these platforms that we use to connect with people through our businesses and through our branding could go away tomorrow. So like, what's the harm in trying something new to see what sticks? And like I said, like it was a year process before I even got to the visual side of things. Does that answer your question?
Totally.
Like that messy in between?
Oh my gosh, I love it so much, lady. Because like, yeah, we have conversations. I feel like my people are like listening right now, following along, because this is how we all have conversations, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm going to ask you a question, but like, I don't know what I just asked. And also like whatever comes out of your mouth is awesome. Because I totally relate to that too. I think that a lot of people, especially new entrepreneurs, like that's what I did when I first started out, is like trying to create this brand that was shiny and sleek. And that is not me, and, and it was hard. And then I kind of went through a similar thing where I was like working with this woman who is awesome, but exactly. It's like, you want people on your team and on your side who have like your vision of business. And like, I think it's like so helpful. I love love encouraging people to show up online as their true selves and like show their face and all that stuff. Cause I know in my soul how scary it can be to start doing that. But I also know from like my personal experiences, like how strong the connections you can build through those actions of showing up and being vulnerable and being scary and just like putting yourself out there. Like the people who you meet then and connect with are your people, right? Like, and so that's just so wonderful. So the reason we have connected, my friends, is because I totally stalked Gabby after I listened to one of her other podcast episodes. And I'm forgetting which podcast it even was.
Oh, it was I think you listened to the Being Boss one.
Oh, Being Boss, of course. And I was like, oh my gosh, because and I've told you at least 5 times now since we started talking like that, I'm very, very geeky when it comes to branding because I feel it so hard in my core because I was the person who started out being like, oh, branding is your logo. And then I started Pinteresting things. I was like, oh, like it can be all these other things. And then I started going down the deeper Pinterest hole and being like, oh, it's like actually like all of your messaging and all of the core values and then how that reflects in the design work and all these things. So I totally feel that journey. But when it comes to the rebrand, something that I did want to ask you, because I feel like a lot of my people do this too, is when, especially, starting out, they're like, oh, I need to pick a business name that means something. I need to create a logo that means something, right? Like I kind of went through that too. And it gave me anxiety with my first business name that I didn't even end up keeping. I changed my business name a year in. But so with your new rebrand, you still kept Blades Creative, which I think is so awesome to like honor your heritage and all that stuff. But it feels a little bit different. Was that kind of hard to let go of that, like the old logo, the arrowhead, that sort of thing? Or was it kind of easy to transition into the new look for you?
I was so ready to let it go because it just didn't feel like me anymore. Like it was this light pink and slate blue. And like, I love those colors. I still love those colors, but like, it just felt so young to me. It felt like my younger self. And like, Blades Creative became so much less about my heritage and more about like me working as Gabrielle Blades with my clients and like what that process had become. And I had often had like mentors or clients tell me like, wow, that what you do is magic. Like, this is wild. Like, how did you take what was in my brain and make this thing that is so unique and so meaningful to the work that I do? And I honestly thought that was silly for a very long time. And then I honestly got into not magic, but like I started reading tarot and I started collecting crystals. And once Ayurveda and Ashtanga like became such a lifestyle, I was starting to learn more about astrology as well, which is the third area of that. And like the spiritual side of things and learning that I am an intuitive person and I often ignore that. But the way not anymore, but the way that I work with my clients is very intuitive. And I often, even when I was very young and like didn't really know why I could create something that resonated with my client so deeply, it was because I was intuitive. And it was because I could feel like I can literally feel and see what they want from me, what they want for their business, without having them have to draw it for me, I guess. And I think that's a huge part of being a designer, but you have to tap into it and really understand it. And that's what led to that change. And when you're talking about like what goes into branding, like, yeah, it's 100% more than just the imagery and the logo. It is so much more. And I can definitely get into like how I rebranded because that's not like my first brand, and the process that came to creating that was very different from like how I ended up designing my second brand.
Yeah. Let's hear a little bit about it. To me, your new brand feels just so much like you and like an inner representation of like all of the things, right? Like of your heritage and how you grew up. And then also like just who you are as a person, and I honestly did not see your previous brand at all, but
so funny.
It like the way you describe it, I totally understand. And that's how I felt too. Like whenever I was branding, it was like, I started with black and white, not me. Then I went to like kind of muted but earthy tones, and I was like trying to create this like a little more. I wanted to be Blades creative, like when like do a second Feel Good Social rebrand, but with like a little lighter colors, you know.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, this is not working for you either, Kins, because like you show up like with jazz hands. I'm an Enneagram 7. So
oh my God, I could totally see that.
yeah, and sometimes I have to like, what? I'm like, you cannot be like. I resonate so much with like the magical people and stuff, but like those type of like deeper tones and stuff, like just were not working for Feel Good Social, because I'm more like,
Right?
wow. And then I finally like went into, but yes. Okay. Sorry. I know.
You're fine. I was thinking about how much your current branding looks and feels like you.
Oh my goodness. And exactly. And like, that's what it is. And so I guess I'm just telling you that I'll feel you so hard with this, but I think that a lot of people struggle when it comes to like getting to that point. They're like, I hear you. I want what you have, but like, how do I get there? You know?
It's really hard.
I know. So tell us about
hard.
your rebrand. I want to hear your process.
Have you been wanting to create a new website? My friend, I have just the website template shop for you. I recently used one of the templates from the gals at Go Live HQ to create my new author website, and it could not be more awesome. Not only was the template super easy to use, I swear it was laid out perfectly already, so I customized it with my own photos and copy in like 2 hours. But also it ended up looking so freaking beautiful in a way that I know I would not have been able to achieve if I'd started from scratch. Go Live HQ has tons of beautiful Squarespace templates so you can easily create and launch your dream website in just a few hours and not have to keep tweaking things forever until it's 6 months later and your website still isn't live. That may or may not have happened to Feel Good Social's website. So believe me, I feel you on that. And the cherry on top, the Go Live gals created a coupon code for you, my Feel Good listener. Just head to feelgoodsocial.com/go live and use the coupon code feelgoodsocial to receive 10% off your template. Again, head to feelgoodsocial.com/go live and use the code feelgoodsocial for 10% off. Pretty cool, huh? I cannot wait to see which template best fits your brand. I went with the Jada Ellis template myself for kinseyalissa.com, but it was seriously a really tough choice. So when you do, head to feelgoodsocial.com/go live and snag your new template. Make sure you send me the link to your new website because I definitely want to see it. All right, let's dive back into this episode, my friend.
Okay. And I think it's so important to share this because as a person who brands other people, like there's so much work that comes before you meet your designer. So, and like maybe you even need to talk to your designer or a strategist before, or a coach, even a coach would be great before you approach your final designer that you've chosen. Because I'm trying to think of like, what was the first step for me? I think the first step was like freaking out about my packages and how they didn't need to be the same anymore. I was like, I don't want to do event collateral anymore. I don't want to work with nonprofits anymore. Like just like the basics of like, what do I enjoy? What do I hate? Sorry, nonprofit. I have to say this in every podcast I do now because I'm like, I'm sorry, nonprofits. I love you, but I can give to you a different way. Like, we can work together differently.
Okay. That's what I loved too, is what you said. Exactly. That is like freaking out about what are my packages? Who is my ideal client? Right. Because that is such a big thing too. Like that I have trouble sometimes communicating with the people who I work with who are like, how do I show up on social media? And I feel like a lot of times people think in this or that, right? And they're like either trying to show up for this type of person fully, like, oh, these, like, I just need clients, like I'm showing up for them. Or they're like, well, my brand needs to be me. And they're like fully showing up for themselves. And both are great, but also once again, kind of middle ground, right? Where it's like, who am I and who do I want to work with? And how can I attract them? Right.
Yes. That's the shift. That's like the crazy shift that has to happen in your mind of like, what kind of life do you want to live every single day? Like, what even are the hours you want to be putting in? How do you want to communicate with your clients? Like, and that's probably going to determine who those clients are. Like, for instance, for me, I don't start working until around 10 a.m. because I want to get my yoga practice in the morning. And I want to like have a slow morning, take my shower, have my breakfast, settle in. And then like, I don't want to talk to people past 6 p.m. So I'm probably going to be working with people that also respect my boundaries. So like your lifestyle and the work that you want to do is going to determine who your audience is. So like when I was thinking about what I like and what I don't like, I was like, this was a few months after May. Like this was in July around my birthday. I always have like an existential crisis and I revisit things. Yeah. And it's also the anniversary of my business on my birthday. So like a lot's happening. And so I was like, do I even want to be designing anymore? And so and this doesn't have to be the same for everybody, but like I had an energy session with one of my favorite energy workers, Jenny. And you know, it was as simple as her asking, she was like, what are you dealing with right now? And I told her, and she was like, you know, you don't have to quit design. Like, what have you been interested in lately? And I was like, well, I love yoga. I love bicycling. I love Ayurveda. I love like working with people who work with herbs and tinctures and wellness. And she was like, well, you know, maybe like make more time to learn about that stuff on the side, but like keep your graphic design business and see where it leads you. And like anybody could have told me that, but I needed to hear it from somebody and I wasn't talking to anybody about it. So like that led me to figuring out like, okay, who do I want to work with? I want to work with wellness businesses. I want to work with other creative entrepreneurs. Like who are the people I have enjoyed working with in the past 5 years? And I love working with like lifestyle is kind of the additional audience that I added because I love working with food and beverage. Sometimes there's going to be a creative entrepreneur that might be like a lawyer that doesn't necessarily fit into a category. And so lifestyle is like just kind of like this vague area that I can say yes or no to. But that week that I had that conversation, I put it out in the universe and I said, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm not accepting any more clients that I have zero interest in. I have to do research for them. I have to like enjoy doing that research. I have to enjoy the subject matter. So if I'm not passionate about it, I'm not doing it. I'm going to say no. And so I got an email from my friend Emily from Being Boss, and there was a project that she couldn't work on anymore, and she passed it on to me. And it was with the Herbiary, which is basically like an herb and apothecary store in Asheville and Philadelphia. And it was a dream client for me. It still is a dream client. I can't even describe to you how special that was to me. And it's like become a thing in my life. Like I have a new friend because the client and I like really clicked. And it was also like, I got that email like the week of my birthday that I thought that, and I was about to start work again on Monday because I like to take a week off. And I was like, holy shit, this is my client. Like this is a sign to me that I am in the right direction and I have made a good choice. So it's very validating. Like that is like, for me, I think you have to listen to the signs that you're being given and like understand, like, am I getting signs that this is the right thing to do? Or am I getting signs that this is the wrong direction? So that's like one step of like how I ended up figuring the audience out. But like, just talk about it. Talk about the things with your friends or like with your counselor or with your coach, or write them down, like write your likes and dislikes down, like kind of assess how things are going and like what makes you feel uncomfortable and what like pumps you up.
Yeah. And I totally know what you mean about like having to be like, nonprofits, I loved you, but like, you know, it wasn't what lit you up the most. And like, that's just something that you have to be aware of and stuff. It's like, that's something I struggled with so much. Like, firstly, when you're just starting out in social media marketing and any kind of entrepreneurship, like you're like, I need money.
Yeah.
Like, anyone who comes to you, like, yes, please. Thank you. But
you don't care what it is. You're like, yes, please.
And then also you get those people coming to you. You're like, I really want to help you. But then like you immediately like regret saying yes. Or you're like, oh yes, I want to help you. And it's awesome. And you love working with them. But like, is this really like helping you thrive in your life and like stuff like that? And so I think finding like out who your ideal customer is really hard. And I love how branding can play a factor into this. I was just chatting with my mindset coach, actually, who is very like much a spiritual person, like astrology, manifestation, like energies, all of those things. and I work with her with her social media content too. And And we've been really running the line with her messaging lately. It's been kind of a struggle for us to figure out like how much spirituality should she bring into her messaging, right? Because like when I first started working with her, and I love spirituality stuff, but I'm not gonna claim myself as a spiritual person or stuff like that, right? And so, you know, she's like, I love working with you. And so we kind of started aiming toward like entrepreneurship in her messaging. But then she's like, no, spirituality is just such a big part of my journey and most of my clients' journey, like when they start working with me. So like we started bringing more of that into her messaging. But then we just had a conversation where she's like, you know, I think that I've found that I'm the person who helps people like awaken to spirituality in a way, right? And so her messaging, we're going to focus more so on more of like the business stuff with like a little bit of spirituality on the side, which is what I feel like with you somewhat with like the yoga stuff. Like when you started dabbling in, like bringing in some of those interests and stuff, it's the difference between what is like the core of your messaging, I think, and then what is relatable. I have trouble describing that sometimes to people too, because like there are your core values, your core message, your core points that you're trying to make. And then there's like the things that you can bring into your business that set you apart, like the cat feeder or like, I read this one lady, she's like, my people know me for, what was it? Oh, Mean Girls. They're like, they see a Mean Girl meme and they send it my way and stuff. And she's like, it's gotten to the point where I've kind of made Mean Girls like a pillar of my brand because people know me for that. But like, I don't remember why I was really bringing that up in the first place, lady. But
I think you were saying something about being relatable. Like it's like there's your core values of what you're actually selling from your business. And then there's things that are about you that are relatable. And like my rebrand was completely about that and exactly about like how you're working with your clients on like, okay, what do you actually want to include in your social media? And that was those were the decisions I was having to make. And when it comes to your community and the people that are like, I have got to say this before this is over because it's so important. And I keep thinking about it for your community, the process of getting from the messy point to the actual visual branding. There's like all these things in between. And it's not just figuring out what you like about what you're doing now and what you don't like, but it's like, figuring out the core values. What are the core things you're selling? What are your packages? Like, how are you going to sell those? Is it 3 packages? Is it 2? Like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but figuring out those basics first. Who's your audience? What are you selling? How are you selling it? And then like, for me, I felt so blocked at that point that I had to go through StoryBrand, the book. And I listened to it first. And this is what I didn't do the first round. I was just like, I'm going to create a graphic design business and it's going to be named after my last name. Like I just needed to do something. And that's what you do within the first like few months to a year of your business. You're like, okay, I just need something. But like this time around, I was like, I'm getting serious about this. This is obviously not a business that I'm like just running for fun. This is a thing that sustains my life and it's going to sustain it for a long time. So what do I actually want to do? And so I went and listened to StoryBrand. I think that's the name of the book, I hope.
Yeah, Building a Story Brand. I love it. Donald Miller, yeah.
Yes. So I listened to it first and then I listened to it again and actually like did the exercises. And I had no idea what that was leading me to. I had people look at it and it helped me understand some stuff, but like I still felt confused. And then it was getting close to the time when I wanted to launch. So it got to be around the end of last year, which is weird because it's already the end of this year. But I was like, okay, what do I need to do to actually like figure out how to brand myself visually? And so I ended up hiring a copywriter because I was like, I'm just going to talk to a copywriter because I feel like the first thing I need to figure out is my voice. And I never have done that before. Like, how do I communicate with this new audience? I know that I want to work with wellness, creative, and lifestyle businesses. What else? So then what's funny is it's Latasha who lives in Denver. She owns Uncanny Content. And
I totally like stalked her after your interview with Being Boss. I was like, oh, she said Uncanny Content, looking up her. I'm one of those people.
I love that about you. She's fabulous. So like I talked to her back in last like October 2020. I don't know. I guess that was the year. And I was going to go to Denver to see if I wanted to live there along with my best friend Bex, who now does live there. And I was like, let me see if she'll meet up with me. I know there's a pandemic, but you never know. So I had a call with her and because she couldn't meet up. So I did a video with her and she was telling me about what she did. She was like, well, I write and figure out people's brand voices and I like write based on their SEO and I do this other stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, noted. Like, I think I'm going to be going through a rebrand soon. So maybe we can work together. When I got back from Denver, I ended up signing up for yoga teacher training. All of these changes that were very much in alignment with what my path was were happening. And by the time the end of the year was coming around, I was like, holy shit, I have to work with Latasha. Like it was one of those nights where like my brain couldn't stop because I was like, how do I move forward with this? I have to do this. It's my calling, whatever. And I thought, uncanny content. I emailed her at like 12 a.m. I'm pretty sure, which is not my style at all. But I was like, nobody checks their email at 12 a.m. It's fine. And I was like, hey, it's me, Gabby. We have to work together. I have to hire you. I don't know if you have capacity, but like, I want to work with you. So we started working together and she like asked all of these things of me, like, what are your packages? How are you selling your brands? How are you like, do you want to do your long-term services still? Like, she was asking me the questions I needed somebody to ask me to figure out what the next steps were with my brand voice, my photography, my actual visual branding, my website, how I would show up on social media because she does all the social media writing. Like all I wanted was somebody to talk like me and hear my voice and like also incorporate how I was selling in that. Like, how am I incorporating intuition without it being really weird? Do I even want to use that word? And so that was like a huge step for me was hiring a copywriter.
Yeah.
And then, and she led me to my website designer who was the next person who helped guide me on like, okay, what are my next steps? So everything was happening at one time. And if I didn't get these things done, such as like figure out my packages and like how I was wanting to speak to my audience, then my stuff wasn't going to get done. And then like with the website, she had to have the branding in hand at some point. So I had to get my branding done and I had to get my photography done. And so things started to fall into place a little bit more every day because I had people that were relying on me that I was paying. And like, it's an expensive process and not everybody had, like, I was lucky I got the EIDL loan. If I didn't have that, I would not have been able to rebrand on that level. But like, you can do these things on a small level by like, just have some friends like ask you, like, how are you selling your stuff? What are you actually selling? Like, who are you selling it to? Are you doing this in package form? Are you doing it hourly? Like, what are some key values that you feel like are super important when people work with you? Like, how do they expect to work with you? It's like, I feel like this is all very high level, but like the more high level questions you ask, the more you can like get more specific.
Oh my gosh, totally. And that's something, this is why I feel this so hard, right? Because I've told you again and again. So like, I want to
love branding.
We love it. But like, but I feel it so hard because personally, I just love like geek out about the strategy, the concepts behind it, and then how everything fits together. And then also this is something that so many of my people struggle with. And I feel it like, even if you do work with like like you're a professional branding person, graphic designer, like you, even if you yourself are that, or if you do like work with someone, a lot of times when people like show up in their business and they like bring it to social media, they're like, okay, well, I know what my logo is and like what my brand colors are, but like, I don't know how to show up on social media like this, you know? And so I kind of had to figure out a way to describe it to people to figure out how can you show up as this brand persona on social media, right? And I break it down into story, voice, and visuals. And it's like figuring out the foundational stories, your values, all those things, figuring out your voice, how you communicate this with people, and then figuring out your visuals, like what does this look like and how do these fit together, right? And so I loved that you brought up, like, I hired a copywriter, and that led me then to be able to, like, that she helped me figure out my foundation and then figure out my voice, and it helped me to figure out my own visuals and like have it all fit together. And also thank you so much for being transparent about needing someone else to like push you to do things.
Yeah.
Because I feel that's so hard.
You can do only so much on your own, but like when your goals start to get a little bigger and you think you can do everything on your own, and then you realize like, I'm stuck, I can't do anything. Like, it's so hard to make that step. But like, once you do it, you're like, I don't want to do anything else. Like, I'm doing this forever. I'm going to delegate everything.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my goodness, lady. Okay. So before I let you go, you went through this whole branding process, and then you finally, were able to create your visuals. Well, because you had to deliver it to the website lady, but also because like you are finally getting this understanding because you had someone to bounce those ideas off of. But when it does come to finally figuring out those visuals for like representing your brand, do you have any tips for that? Because like, I know that a lot of people struggle because they like, I think it's hard for me to kind of describe sometimes, and people struggle because they think it's more like, they think of it as like a superficial, like that superficial level, not superficial, but it's like surface level color palette, like elements, logo, like stuff like that. But it's hard. I think it's hard to hone in on like the emotional level of like the visual brands and stuff. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, I guess, do you have any tips about any of this stuff too?
Yeah, that's tough. It sounds like a lot of your, I don't know if this is true, but is your community typically creating their own branding?
Yeah, I think that a lot of them are like right in those beginning phases, right?
Yeah.
So they either think that branding is so important, but they're like, oh, I don't have like money to invest in this quite yet. So they like hold off and don't do anything in their business yet. Or they're trying to create it, but they don't really know like how to show up yet or anything like that.
Right. Oh, I think this is such an interesting point. Okay. So like if they're in the first like year and they're like in the beginning stages of their branding, I would say not to overthink it too much, like especially that emotional side. That's my job when you're like 2 years in and you're ready to like invest in a new brand and to have somebody like really dig deep and like talk to you and be like, I basically become friends with every single one of my clients because we're talking about some real stuff. But like in the beginning, just kind of honestly, there's probably an online questionnaire somewhere about like, what are some key questions when you're considering rebranding or creating a brand? So like, maybe look up a questionnaire for that to like maybe dig deep. But for the first few months or year, like just make it really pretty and like the color palette will be a thing, but like make sure it's readable first off. Make sure it feels like you, which that's probably a question I need to answer is like, how do you make it feel like you? That's so hard. That's such a hard thing to answer. Like with the typography or the fonts, like choose a font that you like, but that is readable. Choose the colors that you probably see in your daily life often. If your branding is mostly you, if your business is you, like make it feel like you, and that will attract the clients you want. If your business is not necessarily like very you facing and it's like based towards a specific product or it's based toward a specific audience, and that's what's more important first. Like a lot of the time, product-based businesses are more audience facing. Think about that audience. Like, what does that persona who's purchasing what you're offering look like, feel like? What do they like to do? So that's kind of helpful. But I would say for your first brand, like don't overthink it. Just make sure it looks good and people are going to want to click on it. Like, what do you like to look like? Like, what do you like to look at? Like, look at the brands that you like. Start a Pinterest board. Like, look at the colors you enjoy. Like, what makes your heart warm and fuzzy? But don't overthink it. Don't copy anybody's work. But like, also look at what people are doing to make sure that you're somewhat on trend. I do think trends matter to a point because that's what people are going to click on. But also timeless is like really important. But that's probably what you're going to get within like a brand designer. So that's my advice on like creating that initial brand. Is like, keep it simple, keep it like somewhat trendy, enjoy what you've made, make sure it's clickable. But then in the beginning, I would say that your photography is more important. And showing up is more important, like showing your face.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm over here just like pumping her up right now, guys.
And like talk to your people, like be communicative, like use your own voice, talk to your audience like they're your friends. Again, that could depend on the business you're running. Sometimes that's not appropriate. But like be interactive, and like that's your branding for the first year. And then that's going to inform what you're going to tell your brand strategist and brand designer when you hire them. I mean,
I love that. I love that answer so much, because it's true that that's what we need to do, is like be thoughtful and intentional as much as we can. And also like give ourselves permission to like let things evolve. And the hardest part is just like letting go of feeling like it needs to be perfect the first time and just showing up. And then I think that's so important. And it made me so happy to hear that from like a branding person, right? Who's gone through it yourself. Like, is that sometimes it's better. And I feel like you feel the same way. It's almost better probably to work with clients who have experience and know what they're looking to create, instead of like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like you figure it out, you know? And so, okay, you guys heard it from Gabrielle, like show up, figure out who you are, talk to your people, like go through the steps, and it can be messy and it can be intentional at the same time. And then hire Gabrielle to like help you create your magical brand that you want to create.
Yes, that's exactly right.
I love that so much, lady. Okay. Could you please tell everyone where they can connect with you, find out more about you? I already have a few people in my audience, so I'm definitely going to send your way because I know that they want to create magical brands. But where can people connect with you online?
So my website is www.bladescreative.com. That's Blades with an S at the end, like rollerblades. And then you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, is at Blades_creative. And then I would love for people to be signing up for my newsletter, which you can do on my website. There is a form where you can sign up. That's where you're going to get all the updates to your email. And I would just love to connect with you there. I think that's a great place to actually communicate with people, is via email. So
yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, lady. I know, like, I love your branding so much. And I know like so many people in my audience are like, would love like for you to create their brand too. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kinsey. This is just so much fun. I feel like I made a new friend.
Oh yes, I hope so. All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
How wonderful was Gabrielle, you guys? I swear, if you are going to, or if you're trying to, I guess, create a magical brand like she was talking about, definitely go check her out. She is so awesome. I love everything she does, and her energy and personality is just so much fun. I know she would be wonderful to work with. Can you tell that like I'm really wishing that I could hire her? So someone needs to. So go check her out. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it to your Instagram stories and make sure you tag me, because I would love to see it and reshare it and spread the love right back to you. I'm at Feel Good Social. I would love to connect with you, my friend, and and give you a follow back on Instagram. So go head over there, do that, and I will catch you next time I catch you. Thanks so much for listening, my friend. For show notes and a whole lot of other awesome freebies, visit feelgoodsocial.com. Simply go to feelgoodsocial.com for all the goods.